do have a quorum available.
Good, good.
How are you doing?
I am great.
Fantastic. Are you able to see and hear us and view the agenda?
Yes.
Fantastic.
It's 4:30 now. Are we good to go?
Staff is ready, yeah.
Yes, we are, unless you want to give a little more time for other commissioners to join. That is up to you.
Here we have.
There's one.
Give it one more minute here and let me get everything pulled up.
Perfect.
Let others do this.
Yeah, I thought that one too.
Yeah, neither of them work. Michael Dice can do it perfect.
Okay, let's go ahead and call to order then.
Okay, Commissioner McKay,
Present.
Commissioner Thompson,
Present.
Commissioner Freeman,
Present.
Commissioner Stone, Commissioner De La Garza,
Present.
Commissioner Rucker, Commissioner Rising Robbins,
Present.
Commissioner Fontenot,
Present.
and Commissioner Dees.
Present.
Okay, quorum established.
Great, so we'll move on to approval of minutes for October 22nd.
Motion to approve the minutes. This is Christine Robbins.
Second.
All in
That was-
favor? What? Sorry, Craig.
No, I was just making sure y'all knew it was me that second.
Thank you.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, minutes pass. Okay, absences for that October 22nd. We know that Dr. Stone is at grand jury. Was staff notified of the other absences?
Yes, staff was notified and there were technical difficulties with the log on of WebEx and also calling in, but staff was notified.
Okay. So I motion to approve the absences for the 3 commissioners from October 22nd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those 3 are approved. I keep trying to scroll on my screen on your agenda. Staff, was there any public comment submitted?
Staff has received no public comment through email, phone call, or otherwise.
Okay. So the floor is yours then.
Thank you very much, Chair McKay. So item 5 for the Ropes House update. Currently, Parks and Recreation Department is waiting for a letter from Landmark Commission staff with an approval, but with comment. So currently, the Parks and Recreation, they're going to be waiting to bring it to council, but still need a letter from Landmark Commission. And staff is definitely willing to help with that letter.
This is Christine Robbins. Craig, I sent you a reply letter last Friday with a draft.
Okay.
I replied to your email with the draft.
Commissioner Robbins, staff did not receive that email from you. Thank you for sending it. We will forward it directly to Parks and Recreation. And so the next step for them will be to schedule it for City Council and bring it to City Council. So thank you.
Yeah, if you don't have it, I can resend it after the meeting.
Perfect.
Okay, will do.
Thank you. Okay. And moving on to item number 6, there was a recent National Register designation. Texas Historical Commission informed us that on October 21st of 2020, the National Park Service has listed Old Bayview Cemetery in the National Register of Historic Places. So congratulations to y'all and to us as a city. Any questions on that item? Perfect. For item number 7, we do want to inform the commissioners and the public that we will be accepting applications for the 2021 Preservation Awards, and it will be due March 31st. This is very similar timeline to the year before for 2020, as far as the applications being submitted and staff vetting them, and then Landmark Commission will have an opportunity in April to approve the nominations and pick 2. And just a reminder, it will be person or organization as one award, and then building or project will be the second award. And that'll be allow us enough time to present those awards by Preservation Month, which is May. Any questions?
Commissioner Dees, did we ever give out the awards for this year?
Great question, Commissioner Dees. Staff still currently does have the awards. We were directed to wait until COVID protocols or protocols related to meeting in person have been lifted so that we could hand them out in person. Staff is available for further direction on how those awards can be handed out. The awardees were notified the month that we did vote on those awards, and they have received a letter. They have been notified, but they haven't physically received the awards.
Have we done like a press release announcement of those awards?
Yes, we have.
Okay. Yep, man. Happy December, you survived 2020. Here's your award.
Very good. Any other questions?
If everybody else is okay with that, if staff finds a way to get them to them physically.
Yes, we will. We can find a way to get the awards to the recipients. Perfect.
That sounds good. It would suck to have like super backlog, and you still could, if we are able to have, or y'all, I won't be here. If y'all are able to have a May ceremony, you could still acknowledge them as part of that, since they didn't get a public ceremony. But I don't think there's a point in holding awards hostage past 2020.
Understood. And I don't think that requires a vote. It's staff direction. So we will act on that. Okay. So moving on to item number 8, staff does want to acknowledge our commissioner term expirations. And then, so just to be clear for the public, Landmark Commission does have our Chair McKay. Her term is expiring. Vice Chair Thompson, his term is expiring. Commissioner Rutgers, and then Commissioner Stone had an opportunity to accept a second term, but denied that term. So staff would like to say thank you to the commissioners that were able to do 2 or 1 terms here. You will be missed. So thank you. And any questions about your terms or the expirations of them? Real quickly, for the remaining commissioners, the next most possible date for Landmark Commission will be the January date in 2021. because we will not have quorum until city council appoints the new commissioners. Any questions?
This is Commissioner Dees again. I believe I term out here in about a week.
Commissioner Dees, we did fact check for you and your term ends in 2021.
Oh, good. Well, great. Thanks.
This is Christine Robbins. Could you provide an update on any applications or nominations received?
Yes, we have 2 applicants so far. Let me ask, are we allowed to discuss names at all before they're appointed?
Yes, it's public record.
Okay, I believe we do have a real estate agent. Her name is Jean, I think it's Weinhert. She was discussed by Landmark Commission back in, I believe, January or February of this year. She expressed interest in the real estate position, and then I'm not familiar with the second position. But we do want to have Landmark Commission at its capacity of 11 commissioners. With those 2, we will just have quorum. So we are seeking more appointees, more recommendations. Keep sending them to us, and also you want to encourage them to apply to the city secretary's website. And I do know that our Commissioner Reiser Robbins had recommended a second appointee, and they did apply. So. Okay. All right. So moving on to item number 9, we are going to take a brief, well, actually take an hour-long recess until 5:55, when we will reconvene for our historic preservation plan workshop. So we do expect you all to be there, and I will leave it to the Commissioner McKay to recess.
Are we coming back into this WebEx for that? Or
Yes,
just
we are.
click? Okay.
That's my question. Okay, good.
Any questions before we recess?
Thought I heard one there.
All right.
Okay. Then we will see everybody at 5:55 and break for recess.
Perfect. We do have a quorum.
Great.
Okay. Am I unmuted? Is this unmuted?
We're on, yeah.
We're on. Good evening, Chair McKay. The next item. Good evening. This is Nina Nixon-Mendez, Historic Preservation Officer. And the next item on our agenda is our community workshop regarding our historic preservation plan. In 2019, the Landmark Commission voted to work on an update of the historic preservation plan, and staff submitted a grant application to the Texas Historic Commission for funding. The grant was awarded in early 2020, and the firm MacDo Preservation was selected to undertake this important endeavor. This evening, it's my great pleasure to introduce Steph McDougall, who will present information on the historic preservation plan and the steps to update the plan. This presentation will be followed by a question and answer session. We will be receiving comments from our Facebook audience, and questions and comments can also be submitted to dsoutreach@cctexas.com. And we will be addressing those during the Q&A period. So with that, Steph, I'd like to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Nina. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this, the first community meeting for the City of Corpus Christi's Historic Preservation Plan project. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about what this project is all about, what we're doing and why it's important, the project's schedule, how you can get involved, what the city will have at the end of the project, and what that will allow all of you to do more effectively. Next slide, please.
Just a moment, bear with us. I guess because I'm not.
DS management, you have the ball. There we go. Thank you. So we're going to have plenty of time at the end to answer your questions. And as Nina was saying, at any time during the meeting, you can send your questions or comments to dsoutreach@cctexas.com, or if you're watching on Facebook Live, hello, post them in the comments there. We'll answer as many of those as we can during the meeting. But if we don't get to your meeting or your question before we have to wrap up tonight, or if you think of something that you want to ask or tell us later, you can submit your questions and comments at any time during this project, which is going to be well into 2021. Please send those to us in writing so we can make sure we get your input in your own words. And you don't have to worry about writing this down right now. We'll have this slide again at the end of the presentation, and this information is also on the project website. Next slide, please. There we go. So before we go any further, you may be wondering, who is this lady and what is a MacDo Preservation? So MacDo is an award-winning historic preservation consulting firm. We're based in the Houston area. I'm the owner and principal consultant, and we also have team members in Austin, Texas, and in 3 other states, Virginia, Tennessee, and New York. We primarily work with city governments and nonprofit organizations, as you can see here. And importantly, we serve communities in support of your goals. We're probably best known for the robust approach we take to community engagement and are willing to take on contentious projects And we make sure that everyone in the community has the opportunity to get involved, and that those who do are genuinely heard, respected, and valued as partners in these efforts. We don't run away from folks who have grievances or are unhappy about historic preservation or opposed to the way it's being administered. In fact, although those people are often left out of these processes, we believe that they need to have a seat at the table if we're going to have an opportunity to address and potentially resolve their concerns. So please feel free to get involved. We want you to. Now, I do tell everybody at the beginning of these projects that it is unlikely that anyone will be 100% happy with what we develop by the end, but it's our goal that everyone at the end will be more happy than unhappy. The other thing that I can promise you is that you can count on us for transparent, open, and honest communication throughout this project. Most of our clients are city governments, state agencies, or nonprofit organizations, and we work on programs that are focused both at the local level, like this one, as well as those with a statewide or national reach. So we have a lot of experience doing this kind of thing, and we're very excited to work with all of you. Next slide, please. So I wanted to say also, we love Corpus Christi. You have so much great history, and the built heritage here is amazing. You've got early 20th century buildings, of course, after the 1919 hurricane, and some really great mid-century 20th century buildings like the 600 building on Leopard Street, which is so cool. We think that Corpus Christi has a ton of upside potential for historic preservation to become a key economic development tool that can benefit everyone in this community. So what will this project entail? We're going to work with you to develop a plan for practicing historic preservation effectively in the city of Corpus Christi. And that involves figuring out where you are right now and how you got there, where you want to go, and how you want to get there. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that you know a little bit more about us and how we operate, let's talk specifically about our proposed approach. We are going to be reviewing, we have reviewed current plans or existing preservation plans and a lot of data. We've identified stakeholders that we're talking to right now, people who represent different groups within the city. So we're talking to architects and building owners and developers and neighborhood people and nonprofit people and religious leaders and all kinds of folks throughout the city. We're getting the city staff's perspective, of course, and really trying to figure out what has been happening in Corpus Christi with historic preservation to date. Next slide, please. All right, so this is not the first preservation plan that the city has undertaken. The first Landmark Commission was established in Corpus Christi in 1974, and the first Historic Preservation Ordinance, that's a local law, was adopted 2 years later in 1976. The creation of Heritage Park was pivotal in kicking off preservation efforts for the city. And the Landmark Commission was charged with identifying buildings that were historically or culturally significant, basically the things that you want to preserve. So we see the first list of potential landmarks in 1988, and from there, the city undertook what we call a historic resources survey between 1989 and 1991. Now that's an activity where architectural historians like me and my team go around an area, we take photographs and we capture information about each property, and then we use that information to make recommendations for potential historic landmarks and potential historic districts. From those lists, city governments and residents can decide what they want to save and how they want to manage it. And that's what happened in 1992. The Landmark Commission developed a new historic preservation plan. At that time, they identified a number of potential historic districts, which is what we would expect. But for some reason that we haven't figured out quite yet, no historic districts were ever designated. In 1999, the city did designate 4 landmarks and identified 27 other potential landmarks, but not much has happened since then. Probably the biggest preservation-related event took place in 2010 when the city decided to tear down Memorial Coliseum instead of finding a different use for it or a different owner. But on a more positive note, the 2017 Downtown Management District, or in 2017, the Downtown Management District hired Hardy Heck Moore, also a preservation consulting firm, to conduct a historic resources survey and create an inventory of properties in the Downtown Management District and part of Uptown west of Broadway Street. They identified 33 resources that are individually eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, 37 that are eligible to be local landmarks, and 1 potential historic district on the bluff. Next slide, please. So usually this is how historic preservation proceeds. You do a survey to identify historic resources that you may want to preserve. Then you work with property owners to get those designated while creating programs to benefit owners of designated properties. Other cities in Texas have designated historic landmarks and districts, and they're also implementing tax incentives, facade improvement grants, and other programs to help property owners renovate those buildings. We're seeing downtown revitalization, participation in the Main Street program, and those sorts of things in other cities, but those activities just don't seem to have happened here to the same extent, and we're not exactly sure why yet. Next slide, please. Here's what's officially been listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and let me be really clear that being listed on the National Register does not restrict a property in any way. It's a recognition. There are no regulations associated with the National Register. So in Corpus Christi, 14 individual resources or buildings have been listed on the National Register, no historic districts. The city of Corpus Christi also has 25 properties designated as local landmarks. 4 are both locally designated and on the National Register, and that includes the 9 houses in Heritage Park, as well as Old Bayview Cemetery, which my firm just worked with the Friends of Old Bayview to get listed on the National Register. It also includes Artesian Park and the USS Lexington. So in total, the city of Corpus Christi in 45 years has recognized about 20 buildings in the entire city as being historically or architecturally significant. Next slide, please. For comparison, let's look at the city of Plano, Texas. It's the next largest city in Texas after Corpus Christi. So you can see here that they adopted their first preservation ordinance at about the same time that you did. They now have 2 historic districts with 134 properties in the residential district and 43 properties downtown, for a total of about 200 designated properties altogether. Their historic preservation ordinance, like most historic preservation ordinances around the United States, gives their Heritage Commission the authority to say no to proposed changes and demolitions. They have design guidelines so that property owners will know what they can and can't do. And because they have these regulations, they can provide economic incentives to property owners who follow those rules. Both local tax exemptions and grants are available to help people fix up and maintain historic buildings. They also have help from a local nonprofit organization, the Plano Conservancy for Historic Preservation, and they've been recognized nationally for their outstanding work under difficult circumstances. This is the kind of thing that Corpus Christi could decide to do if you want to. And finding out what you want is basically what we're here for. Next slide, please. Okay, now that you know where you're starting from, the next step is to figure out where you want to go. So we're conducting interviews with stakeholder individuals and organizations over, well, really, we have been doing it. We're going to finish that up in the next week or so. We're going to compile those responses, take out any personally identifying information, and then report that back to you. You'll see all of these summary reports on the project website. Now, this will give us a great start, but that's anecdotal feedback. When people give you their opinion and it's just a few people, you can't say, well, that's how the community feels. We need to know the extent to which those opinions and ideas are representative of the larger community. And we do that through a survey. This is the kind of survey where we ask questions and you give answers, unlike the Historic Resources survey earlier. So we'll do a survey that will be available online and in paper copies, so you don't have to have a computer or an internet connection to participate. We want to hear from everybody. We'll have another public meeting after the survey is complete to share our findings, and at that point, we'll also tell you about some preliminary potential recommendations. We'll get your feedback on those. Historic preservation is a tool. It can be used to do a lot of things. It can be used to support economic development, heritage tourism, improve property values. Preservation projects, like revitalizing downtown buildings, can create skilled jobs in the skilled trades. That supports a strong local economy, and a lot of historic buildings are right-sized for startup businesses. So we want to know if and how you, the community, would like to use preservation to support your goals, if in fact you do. All right, let's see that next slide. Now, some people think that historic preservation is only about buildings, and that's the way we used to look at it a couple decades ago. But today, we practice preservation a little bit differently. Historic preservation can also preserve cultural heritage, and this is especially important if neighborhoods have had a lot of changes over time. The communities who lived and still live in those neighborhoods are an important part of the rich fabric of this city, and the places that matter to you, whether they remain or have been lost or are being used for something different today, are worth our time and our attention. We're going to make sure that this preservation plan includes cultural heritage, things that are important to the community, whether or not they fit neatly into the definitions that historic preservation has traditionally used to define what's significant. So we want you to tell us what you want to keep around for future generations. What is your family's legacy? What's the legacy that your church, your school, your club, your neighborhood, elders, and young people want to carry forward into the future? What are the stories of this community? If we know what you value, we can figure out how to make those things a priority. We're counting on you to tell us. Next slide, please. Okay, so once we know where you want to go and what you want to do, we'll map out a path to get there. You will have the opportunity not only to provide feedback, but also to see your ideas and opinions and feedback represented in the plan. But a plan is no good if it's not implemented. And so we're going to do everything we can during the development of the preservation plan to make sure that it is implementable. Next slide. All right. So let's look at the schedule. We spent the first month collecting data and information. Right now, we're conducting stakeholder interviews and having this first community meeting. After the first of the year, we'll launch the survey. Remember, that's going to be online and available on paper. And we'll have the second community meeting after we've summarized all of that data and the input that we've received to that point. The rest of the spring is going to be spent drafting the preservation plan document before we roll it out for the third community meeting, so we can go over that with you and get your feedback on it. And then finally, we will work with city staff through the plan approval and adoption process. Next slide, please. We're almost done. Okay, so here are some things that could happen as a result of the preservation plan. So as I've said, Corpus Christi has nothing but potential. The opportunities for downtown revitalization here are outstanding. Plus, you've got great neighborhoods. The city could become a major destination for Texans on par with San Antonio and Galveston and Georgetown, but unique because you have this amazing collection of mid-century buildings that those other cities don't have. Corpus Christi is poised to be amazing, and historic preservation can help you get there if that's what you want to do. We'll see what you have to say. And here's how you can let us know what you think. Next slide. Last slide. Okay, we want to hear from you. You can send us email. You can post comments on the website. You can send mail through the U.S. Postal Service with a stamp. You can call us. Priscilla Ramirez from Development Services is the city staff member that you'll talk to if you call this number. And my number is here on the screen as well. So if you call that number, you'll get me on my cell phone, and I'll be happy to talk to you. But please, to the extent possible, if you can send your comments to us in writing, that helps us make sure that we get your thoughts and your concerns and comments, suggestions, feedback, input, whatever, in your own words, rather than us having to take notes and hope we get that correct. So please get in contact with us. Let us know what you think. I'm looking forward to talking more with you. And at this time, we are going to take your questions. And I will stay and answer questions as long as you have them.
Hi, Steph.
Hey, Craig.
First question. Hi. First question comes from our DS Outreach email from Shelly Rios. She works at Corpus Christi Parks and Recreation and is also part of the DOCO MOMO, which is International Committee for Documentation and Conservation of Buildings, Sites, and Neighborhoods of Modern Movement. Her question is the preservation of local modern structures something we can finally consider?
So when yes, Shelley, thanks for your question. That is a really good question. So during the 2017 survey, one of the things that the survey found, and I have already had conversations with the National Register Coordinator for the state of Texas about this. One of the things that they found was that there is great building stock. In some cases, buildings would not be eligible for the National Register in their current condition because so many changes have been made to the outside. But if a building owner, for example, were to take advantage of the federal and state tax credit programs, which together can return up to 45% of rehabilitation expenses back to the owner, if they were to do that and brought that building back, not necessarily a restoration, but rehabilitation that would maybe take off a slip cover, expose an original facade, and that sort of thing, that yes, there are other buildings that could become eligible for the National Register and for all of those benefits that come with that, if they were, if some of those alterations were reversed during the project. So as I said, there are a number of individual buildings downtown that have already been identified as eligible during that 2017 survey. And when we came down and spent some time driving all over the city and taking pictures and looking at everything, we think that there are more that could become eligible. And, you know, we see that in a lot of cities. We're working with the city of Paris, Texas right now, and they're farther along than Corpus Christi is. But some of their buildings are in that same kind of situation where they're, excuse me, they're not currently eligible, but they weren't when the project started, but now they are. And they're actually, we were up there in August, and they were taking a slip cover off the front of the building while we were there. It was pretty great to see. And I'm so excited that you're part of Docomomo and that you're working in the Parks Department. I can't wait to talk to you.
All right, Steph. This question is from Facebook. Does the city know the status of the old Nueces County Courthouse? And is this the city's or the county's responsibility?
I'm going to let Nina answer that question since it's about the city.
Yes, regarding the status of the old Nueces County Courthouse, the county judge had commissioned a structural study of the building that had been undertaken. And I know that based on this feasibility study, I think it was supported in part by the Texas Historical Commission. There's still an interest on the part of the county to look towards redeveloping the building, either selling the property for redevelopment or somehow facilitating that redevelopment. So that is still a goal of the county. That's my understanding.
All right, next question from Facebook is, are there any plans on preserving the Galvan Ballroom on Agnes?
That's a great question. So the Galvan Ballroom is already listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It is still owned by the Galvan family, and until COVID shut down all our events and things, still actively used. So it's my understanding, and I know Bobby Galvan Jr., that there's no plan to do anything that would not preserve it, but it is being preserved right now by the family.
All right, the next question from Facebook is, what Black community stakeholders has the city talked to, and will Black community landmarks in Corpus Christi be protected?
That is a great question. So yes, I actually have been talking to and am on the docket to talk to a number of African American people in the city of Corpus Christi. I have a phone call scheduled with Reverend Claude Axel for tomorrow, and with Jeremiah. Shoot, I'm so sorry. This is terrible because I just made this plan with him. Baldwin, I'm sorry, with Jeremiah Baldwin for next week. I've talked to Larry Running Turtle Salazar from the Native American community today. Talked to Dr. Nicodame from LULAC #1 and the Tejano Civil Rights Museum today. I've talked to Tina Butler, who is with African American Voices of Corpus Christi, and she's been very helpful in connecting me with other African American folks. So I am, we're casting a wide net yes, we are looking very closely at historic preservation in the African American community in Corpus Christi. And I do want to say that one of the things that we're very cognizant of is that places and spaces can be very important. So, for example, if Coles Park is the place where emancipation was celebrated, where Juneteenth was celebrated historically or in recent years, just because there might not be something built in that park that is specifically for that use, that doesn't mean that the space itself is not culturally significant. So that's one reason we're looking at cultural landscapes, not just buildings, not just structures, that, you know, looking at, you know, the important man's house is really an old way of doing historic preservation. You know, today we take a much more holistic look at the whole community. And that's why we want to hear about the things that you all value. Because let's say that there are foodways or storytelling or events that have happened. There may be 5 or 6 things that we find out about, and maybe only one of them is associated with a building or a site, but altogether they form elements of that cultural tradition. That becomes more important, you know, when we know about all those things. It makes the information we have richer and helps us figure out what can be done to support preserving history, not just the, you know, place, not just buildings. You know, we're kind of, you know, thinking beyond the buildings at this point. So I do want to tell everybody, yes, this is going to be a plan that represents everybody in Corpus Christi that I can possibly talk to. It'll be, we strive at my firm for diversity, inclusivity, equity, very important, and accessibility. And we try to bring that to all of our projects. And so it's very important to me to talk to all kinds of different communities and people in Corpus. And we're making a special effort to make sure that we hear from all the different ethnic groups that we can. What else?
All right, next question from Facebook is, does the city know if there are any plans for the old Ropes Steamboat House sitting in Heritage Park?
I'll let Nina take that one too.
The Ropes House is a structure that was moved to the Heritage Park facility and has been unrestored. In other words, it's remained unrestored for many a year. And unfortunately, it has deteriorated. The Parks Department was interested in demolishing the structure because of the public health and safety reasons and the fact that it had become a nuisance, a public nuisance to the area. And the Landmark Commission did consider that demolition under the Vacant Buildings Ordinance and had authorized it, subject to the building being documented thoroughly. And however, the Parks Department has now identified a company that is interested in relocating the structure and restoring it. And so the Parks Department is currently assessing that situation and had asked the Landmark Commission actually in their last meeting if they had a recommendation related to that. And the Landmark Commission supported that effort, again, as long as the building were thoroughly documented before any kind of relocation took place. Of course, that is something that would have to be authorized through City Council. And so again, that is currently under consideration by the Parks Department.
Thank you, Nina. The next question is from Facebook. It says, I have a home that has been designated as a historic potential. What would I need to do to make it a historical landmark? Also, will this affect what improvements or renovations I can do to my home?
I'll let you folks at the city take that one as well. I don't want to get anything wrong about your ordinance.
Craig, go ahead and take that one.
Sure. So for our local historic designation, there are very few restrictions in the long term as to doing improvements or renovations on your home. If you do designate it as a local landmark, it would have to go before our landmark commission for review. And ultimately what that review would be doing is to review the modifications that you're making to ensure that you're not harming its historical integrity, made it historical when it was first designated. Ultimately, you would be able to do the renovations, but Landmark Commission would want to advise you on the best route that you would want to take. As far as making it historic, it is a designation process that you would apply to before the city. And it's actually here at Development Services that you would apply. And it would go through Landmark Commission, Planning Commission, and then ultimately City Council for final approval of the designation.
So one thing that we'll be able to do as part of this preservation plan effort is also to identify some of these processes and give the city recommendations for how those can be explained on websites, how those can be made more clear, how folks can learn more about them. Generally, if you're wondering, how do I know what I should do with a historic building? What we recommend and what most historic preservation ordinances require is that you try to avoid removing or damaging what we call character defining features. These are the architectural elements that make something, for example, a particular architectural style or that are particularly noteworthy. So on a craftsman house, for example, you know how sometimes those houses have porch columns and they're square, but they are bigger at the bottom than at the top. We call that a square tapered column. That's a character defining feature. So you wouldn't want to remove that and put in like a 4x4 post, for example. Generally, the character defining features of a historic building tend to be mostly on the front of the building. And so that's generally what we care about the most. Historic preservation ordinances and commissions almost never have anything to do with the inside of a building. And in some cases, they don't even look at things that can't be seen from the street. But every ordinance in every city is a little bit different. And we're going to provide the city of Corpus Christi with some recommendations for how the city's ordinance can be made a little bit more clear and easy to use. And also to make sure that they have good models and examples from other cities about how to provide good information to all of you.
Next question from Facebook. Would Roy Miller High School, along with Buck Stadium, ever be considered as a historic preservation site?
That's a great question. I am not personally familiar with the high school and stadium, but I will answer your question this way. There are different reasons that things can be considered historic. It can be historic because of its association with an event or community development and things like that. It can be important because of its architecture. It can be important because of its association with a person who was prominent in the community or the state or the nation, or because of the potential for archaeological findings there. So usually those are the four main reasons that, that things are important or considered significant. And then the other thing that comes into play is how many things have changed in terms of that building or site's appearance over time. So if you have a building that was architecturally or historically significant, but it's been changed a lot, we say that its integrity, its architectural or historical integrity has been damaged. That's kind of a jargony word, but that's what we mean by that. That's the words that we use. So depending on what those associations were, if it were the first stadium, the first modern stadium in Corpus Christi, or important to the city for other reasons. There's the potential for it to be designated, but then we also have to look at, what condition is it in now? Now, that's not a maintenance issue, that's a alterations issue. Yes, I think, for any building, you could look at it and say the potential, would have to be evaluated on both of those, with both of those things in mind. And hopefully if that helps answer your question. And if you have more questions about that sort of thing, if you want to reach out to us, put in your email that you want me to give you a call, and so I can explain this more. I'm happy to do that too.
Okay, Steph, the next question is going to come from our Planning Commissioner, Miller.
Great.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you facilitating this and all of your hard work to date and all the hard work that's going to go into the rest of this plan. I wanted to make a few comments. First of all, you said you'd mentioned that it's kind of unclear why we don't have a very solid historic preservation plan, or what would seem like a want to. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And one of the reasons is, obviously the city is kind of a strange shape. It's not really a nuclear city that has grown out from a historic core and moved outward in that shape. And it's kind of had to migrate, this coastal, through the coastal plains and kind of, we have the port to the north and the bay to the east. On top of that, we have a lot of harsh environmental concerns, with the sea breeze and salt and caustic environment. So it makes it a little difficult to maintain. But I am a staunch advocate for historic preservation, and I would like to see a lot more of it being done here. And I'm curious to see, what Plano has done to, add some teeth to their historic landmark preservation plan. Because, most recently, the most recent landmark case that came before the Planning Commission was with regards to Dr. Hector P. Garcia's medical clinic. And an Austin developer wanted to come in and not completely change the building, but change a lot of the exterior finishes to more modern finishes, moving away from the clay block and blue paint that it's so iconic of that Central Pharmacy building. So ultimately we denied the applicant's request, but all it really did was just cause him to wait another 30 days before he went ahead and did whatever he wanted to do anyway. So what can the city do to make changes to add some teeth to that? And what would that require? Would it require a supermajority vote of the city council or what?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I'll tell you that you're in a very similar situation to what was happening in Houston between 1995 and 2010. In 1995, the city of Houston adopted a historic preservation ordinance, but it was a lot like yours is now, where the Historic Commission was kind of just advisory, and they could say, no, you can't tear that down, or make those changes, but then the person just had to wait 120 days and then they could just do whatever they wanted. And that was, really what happened. And you can see what has happened in Houston. Since then, there's been, a million teardowns and, and maybe not some of the greatest, most high quality buildings being constructed in the place of things that in some cases were, well-made buildings that could have been reused. So in 2010, the city of Houston redid its historic preservation ordinance. And this was something that went through a very long public process to make sure that it reflected what people wanted. And that was what put teeth into their ordinance, giving the Historic Commission the ability to say no, and that means no. Now, at that time, they had some landmarks that, things that had been landmarked that, were done under the old rules. And so what they did, so that they weren't changing the rules midstream on anyone, was that they created a new class of protected landmarks, so that if you had a building that was just a landmark, you still fell into the, 120 days rule, but anything that was designated as a protected landmark was governed by the part of the ordinance that said, this has teeth, and anything going forward was governed by the new ordinance. So there was an attempt to be fair, to everybody. You don't want people to buy into having a landmark building and then, you change the rules. There's no interest in having any kind of, sense of bait and switch. But since then, the city of Houston has added a ton of historic districts. They are now up to 22 historic districts. It's something like 8,000 buildings in Houston. Of course, Houston's gigantic, but 8,000 buildings in Houston that are designated either individually or within a historic district. And what you see, which, we have a ton of economic data from all across the country for decades, is that buildings that are in historic districts have higher and more stable property values than the same kind of buildings just outside the historic district. And the reason for that is that people know when they buy in a historic district that nobody is going to move in next to them, tear down 3 houses and put up something gigantic, or do other stuff that is bad for their property values. So when we talk about historic preservation, I love to talk about property values, because if you're a person who invested in your home and invested in restoring it or rehabilitating it, and keeping the historic character, your property rights are important. They are more important than a speculative developer, in my opinion, who wants to come in and put something in next to you, and they're not going to have to live with the results of that. They get their money and off they go. I think the people who live in the neighborhoods now, their property rights are just as important, if not more important, than people who want to come in and just flip houses. So, I can have the property rights discussion all day long. Happy to have that. But I think that there's a great opportunity in Corpus Christi to do some of the things that have already been proven to work in other cities. And one of the things that we'll do is bring all these best practices to bear for you and explain, what other cities have done, how that's worked. We actually wrote the Historic Preservation Ordinance, one of the Historic Preservation Ordinances that the Texas Historical Commission gives out to cities that want to become certified local governments. Corpus Christi is a certified local government. A grant from that program is paying for this plan in part. So we have a lot of experience working with cities to write ordinances to help them, create rules and regulations that the community is happy with. and that are easy to find, in your code of ordinances, so that it's not hard to, get all the information you need when you need it.
Quick follow-up. With the coastal environment, we also have to deal with windstorm requirements for the Texas Department of Insurance.
Yep.
And I've worked on a couple of historic preservation projects in the past where the windows are a big problem, roofing materials are a big problem, for it to be able to mesh with the goals of the Landmark Commission. Have you worked in any coastal cities like, say, Galveston or anything to find a happy medium between those two barriers?
Yeah, so I live on the coast myself. I live in League City, Texas. We're halfway between Houston and Galveston. We're right on Galveston Bay, but the interior part. Yes, so there are a number of properties in Galveston County, a lot of them in Galveston, but also some in League City that have an exemption from having to meet windstorm certification requirements for things like windows because they are already designated historic. So the state recognizes that there is an issue with saying you have to go back with these, with the windstorm certified windows, for example. And as someone who lives in a county where those are required, where the roofing is required, I know all about that stuff. And I understand that can be very difficult. When we were replacing windows in my mid-century modern ranch home, in a neighborhood which is going before the State Board of Review for a National Register nomination in January, we had really big windows and we were very limited in how we could replace them because a lot of people just don't certify windows of a certain size for windstorm. And so it was this huge rigmarole. But we have worked with the folks down in Galveston at the Galveston Historical Foundation who managed that historic exemption program for windstorm. And I personally served on the League City Historic Commission and worked with the League City Historical Society to get the word out to folks in our historic district about the availability of that exemption so that they have window damage during a storm, they can repair those historic windows instead of having to replace them. Happy to have more conversations with you about that kind of stuff. I also wanted to mention that Kelly Little, who is one of our associates at McDo, spent 10 years working for the Texas Historical Commission as the liaison to FEMA during Hurricane Harvey and as the liaison to the General Land Office during Hurricane Ike. Her part of Texas when she was a project reviewer for the Texas Historical Commission included Corpus Christi. So we have a disaster expert on the team, and we'll be talking to you a lot about disaster recovery planning as part of the preservation plan as well.
All right, Steph, we have about until 7 o'clock, so we have time for a couple more questions for you.
Okay, let me have it.
Okay, so this is coming from Facebook. Buildings in the Washington Coles area, which are historic and have rich history, are in the process of being torn down. Will these buildings be considered for the preservation plan?
I think the north side neighborhoods are really important to take a look at. Now, I know that the Texas Historical Commission completed what they call a Section 106 review of the Hillcrest and Washington Coles neighborhoods prior to the bridge project. I'm not concerned with those findings. What we want to do is talk to residents, property owners, people who may have grown up in those neighborhoods and took a buyout or are living in different neighborhoods now, find out what you value in those neighborhoods so we can talk to you about what your options are. I think some of the ways that historic preservation has typically looked at different neighborhoods in the past has been very white centric and Anglo-centric. And so we're trying to make sure that we don't repeat those issues on this preservation plan, regardless of where things are being torn down, regardless of how much of a neighborhood is left. I know people are still living in those neighborhoods. That's not it's not a situation of there's nothing there anymore. People are still there. So, we want to talk to folks who have connections to that neighborhood, where they still live there or not, find out what's important to you.
Okay. Last question from Facebook will be, how would you describe the benefits of historic preservation to a person who isn't versed in historic preservation? Why should the average person care?
That's a really good question. So the way that I usually phrase it is, I want you to look around your neighborhood. What do you like about your neighborhood that you would be sorry to see go away? That might be, things like mature trees, and there's a lot of space between the houses, and so there's room for kids to play. It could be that when you walk your dog at night, all your neighbors are sitting out on their front porches, and so you get to chat with them. It could be that you just really like the way things look. There are a lot of different things that make a neighborhood or a part of a city really valued by the people who inhabit it. And historic preservation really seeks to figure out what you want to keep for future generations, and then how to do that in a way that doesn't put a glass box over your neighborhood and turn it into a museum. So we're not interested in freezing a building in time. What we're interested in doing is finding out how to help you keep things around, preserve your legacy for the future. And we're pretty practical. You're not going to find anybody on our team who wants to tell you what color to paint your house or anything like that. It's not a thing we do. But I talk to a lot of people who say, well, I don't want a bunch of McMansions, being built in my neighborhood. Well, historic preservation ordinances are one of the only tools that we have to prevent things like that. So we look at, design standards, the development code and that sort of thing. You can do it without a historic preservation ordinance. I'm working with the city of Sugar Land right now to accomplish that for a neighborhood, but it's easier to do it with a historic preservation ordinance, because then you have a commission that has public meetings. And so all of those cases come before the commission in public. It's a transparent system, a process. And so people can, neighbors can come speak for it, against it, et cetera. And everybody gets to have a say. So I think historic preservation is valuable because it's a democratic process. It's not like an HOA. I used to live in an HOA neighborhood. And for those of you who do, the HOA tells you what you can and can't do, and you really don't have a lot of recourse. And that's not the case with historic preservation in historic districts. You have recourse, you have a public process, and it's fair and consistent. So if you have things that you want to keep around for the future that you value, historic preservation is one of the best tools that we have to make that happen.
All right, Steph, thank you so much for leading this workshop.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, everyone that's listening, all of your questions that weren't answered, staff will be working to collect those questions and get those answered. And they will be available on the preservation plan website. It's actually cctexas.com/HPP. All right. And I do want to turn it over to our chair, Jillian McKay. I believe the last item for this meeting is going to be adjournment.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Steph, for kicking this off for us. It's a very exciting point to be at for us. So you're going to hear a crying baby in the background. Do we have a motion to adjourn the Landmark Commission meeting and workshop?
Commissioner Dees, I would make the motion.
Commissioner Robbins, I second.
All right, meeting is adjourned, and this is my last one. Thank you all.
God bless.
Thank you all so much.